Let's go.
I sell products, not advertising.
This monkey business is in your blood, under your skin. You're not getting out, you're just getting in, you're only getting started.
People will think.
What I tell them to think.
Oh, have I got your attention now?
You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount.
This guy's got the right idea.
Why don't we begin?
Target locked and ready. Bombs away.
Welcome to episode 20 of Built to Scale with me, your host, Mitch Fanning. For those tuning in for the first time, the goal of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with other early stage tech executives and operators, with the focus being on helping B2B SaaS or tech companies go to market, scale, and win. Now, before we get into the episode, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the first responders out there who are doing everything they can to care for others in need at this time. You truly deserve our gratitude. Once again, thank you. All right, so in episode 20, I had a great conversation with Nicolas Vandenberghe, co-founder and CEO of Chili Piper, the go-to scheduling app for revenue teams at companies like Sendozo, Gainsight, and many more, who all use Chili Piper to double pipeline and close more deals. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Nicola, he began his journey selling newspapers on the streets of Paris, then went on to start and sell 3 tech companies before bootstrapping Chili Piper to 40-plus employees in less than 5 years. Now, during our conversation, we cover a lot of ground, including the advice that Steve Jobs gave Nicola back in the 90s, how Chili Piper is not only weathering the COVID-19 storm, but thriving as a result of it, and the one thing that Nicola believes that most around him don't. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did, so without further ado, let's get into it.
We now have visual on target.
So Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So I've been looking forward to this conversation since the last time we spoke, because as a result of COVID and all the things that have been happening, a lot of companies are starting to talk about revenues being down, having to readjust forecasting, having to adjust to remote working when they haven't had to do that. And obviously it's been harder to sell in this environment. But Chili Piper has seemed to weather this storm, and obviously I want to unpack that a little bit with you later on. But first, to kick things off, I'd like to actually go way back when you were taking your MBA at Stanford, and you had the opportunity to hear Steve Jobs come in. I guess he did a talk to the class. What did you take away from that experience, and specifically, what did he say, if anything, that in retrospect has been helpful for you in the last 2 or 3 months?
He had some magic words. It's actually recorded. If you search for them on YouTube, you'll find it. So obviously it's a thought that was important to him, and he said many times. He looked at us and he said, your life is going to change when you realize one simple thing. And that is that everything around you, everything you use, everything you buy has been created by somebody no smarter than you. So you too can create your own things, and you too can change the world the way you want it. And that just hit home for me. I looked at him at the time. He was CEO of Next, a computer company, and Next was struggling. The joke was that he was going next to nowhere, and he actually complained a lot about how the press was criticizing him, but yet he had this belief in the ability of people to be creative and come up with new solutions. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be that person, and that's a core belief that if something is not quite right around you, would just go and try to fix it. I've actually started another company, as you know. I'm founder and CEO of Chili Piper, but a couple of years into it, I started another company called Gypsy Time. I was trying to use different to-do lists, and then I've never found something that quite worked for me. The reason why is my to-dos kept accumulating in my list, and they were never getting done. And so I had the thought of Steve Jobs and saying, remember, that everything that has been invented is by people no smarter than you. So if they I've come up with this type of to-do list. It doesn't mean that you can't do anything different. It just means that those who invented them just thought that was the right thing. If you think of something different, you can go and do it. So I started Deep System to get a to-do list helping people do things as opposed to helping people list things. And there's been a few magic words for me.
Well, obviously you took it to heart, and like you said, you're in like multiple companies now. It's obviously 4 or 5 companies that you've kind of been involved in and started, and
that's right.
At one form or another. So let's kind of fast forward and switch gears to Chili Piper.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what is Chili Piper? Why did you start it? And what problem are you guys trying to ultimately solve?
I was helping a friend of mine who had founded a very exciting telecom company to go after the big guys, and he asked me to run his sales department for him, and my sales team was somewhat old-fashioned. They were, it's a surprising thing, but people in telecom is not as high-tech as people in the tech industry. So when I set them up on Salesforce, it's as if I had asked them to fly to the moon. They said, we're not going to use that thing. And they refused to it. And so I looked at it. Salesforce was designed in 1999. And it's the same design, and now they're changing it, but at the time it was the same design. They were still live, and I thought that's just wrong. I mean, nowadays software is enjoyable. It's a pleasure to use. My daughters, when they're on the iPhone, I don't have to beg them to use the iPhone. They just love it. So I had this vision that sales tech was going to be completely changed, and a whole bunch of tools would be created to help salespeople. And same thing applies. I think if that's going to happen, I want to be the person making it happen. And more specifically, I thought, okay, what are the tools that salespeople use every day? And if you think of it, it was around the time when LinkedIn was really taking off. So obviously LinkedIn is a big thing, but outside of LinkedIn, salespeople typically use their email, their phone, their calendar. And the tool that they use to do their job as professionals are the exact same Gmail Outlook as my mother uses to email me, right? And I thought that cannot continue. At some stage, somebody's going to crack and say, look, to do emails and calendar and your salesperson, you need all sorts of tools that take into account the context of what you need to do and do a much better job. So that was the impetus of starting Chili Piper. We started with scheduling, because scheduling is the life and blood of sales, right? Meetings is where it all starts. And now we're moving into emails, because it turned out that emails are a very critical part of the sales process. And it's actually under considered. To be more precise, there's a lot of attention on cold emails, and that's because people struggle with them. But if you think of it, once you get the meeting, you start the meeting, then most of the follow-up process is going to be by email also, and people don't pay attention to it. What we call the warm emails, the emails where you already engage and you need to move things. And that's what we decided we'd go after. We said, now that we've got scheduling pretty much figured out, the next thing we're going to help salespeople with email. So that's the big picture of Chili Piper.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were saying that. I'm involved on the product management side of things at my company. And one of the things I always tell the product team is, when you're looking at UI, UX, and we're kind of revamping our platform, you're really, you need to think about the fact that somebody got into your software. They just actually had the Uber experience because they just came to work. This is obviously when things were normal, and they probably ordered a Starbucks through their app. And if you can't build that same experience in B2B software, there's a disconnect. So I completely agree.
Or otherwise somebody will, and you'll be obsolete. Yes, exactly. That's the idea.
So when COVID-19 pandemic kind of began, a lot of companies were kind of, first of all, everyone kind of just stood still and paused, and then a lot of these companies were, putting in freezes. They were kind of, going into defense mode. But just from the research I've done, when you had a conversation with investors, etc., you asked the question, how do we actually grow in this situation?
That's exactly right.
How did you? So, what are some of the things that you've done, or what have you done to kind of see that through in terms of because it does seem like you guys are obviously doing fairly well, all things considered.
Indeed, we are hiring when everybody's having layoffs. So, first of all, we had an unfair competitive advantage where COVID happened. And that's because when we founded the company in 2016, my wife and co-founder and I decided that from the ground up, the company would be 100% remote. The reason for that is we figured, look, there's talent everywhere in the world. So as you probably guessed, I'm originally French. I grew up in the south of France. And my wife and co-founder is from Romania. So obviously we have a vested interest in believing that there's talent everywhere in the world. And we thought, we are currently based in Brooklyn, and we thought, so should we hire people who happen to live in Brooklyn, or should we happen to hire people wherever they are in the planet? And that was an obvious answer. I would say, of course we should go well. So we decided that we would just hire people wherever they are and go run the company in a distributed fashion. So as of today, we are 42 people in 36 cities and 16 countries. And that was before COVID, right? We never thought that some virus would make people go back home and work from home. That was not the purpose. So we were heavily prepared, right? So we are already operating remotely and working. But that's gave it an edge on the operational side. On the strategic side, like other companies, we lost some customers that were very affected by COVID. So retail, travel, we had customers in these spaces, and it's just those spaces shut down, and there's nothing you can do. We had a reasonably balanced portfolio, and what we did very early on is we thought, okay, it's very clear that some spaces are going to be super affected, and others are going to benefit. Like an obvious example is Zoom, right? They're going from 30 to 200 million active users because everybody needs Zoom in the time of COVID. So we very quickly made a list of the verticals that were actually either favorably impacted or at least neutral. And we went after them. We redirected our sales development reps to go after these sectors. And it sounds obvious, but it worked, and we booked more demos in the last 2 months than every prior month, as in demos in total and per rep. It's just worked really well. Those companies that are positively or neutrally affected are very actively trying to improve their processes, because there's no question that in the times of uncertainty, you can't afford to take extra risk in inefficiencies, because if you spend more money on doing something that should take less money, then you have the risk of running out of money. So companies were very focused on efficiencies and improved their efficiencies. So the two put together meant that we ended up getting more interest. Now, I won't deny the fact that buyers are more cautious. So while we did get a lot more demos and a lot more even inbound interest, the sales cycles are longer. Mm-hmm. So either budgets are frozen or people have more time to look at these options. But it does close. So it's not lower revenue, is just a bit slower, but it worked. So that's what happened. We kept growing we've hired more people. We still have a lot of opening jobs, and now I see that other countries have started reopening their economy, and so far it seems to be going very well. It seems that the second wave of this virus seems less and less likely to happen. Of course, nobody can tell the future.
Sure.
So I think there's one more thing that we did that is not apparent, and I told everybody every Friday we have a company meeting on Zoom. It's a very fun meeting where people from all over the world show up on the Zoom grid. And very early on in the crisis, I said, this is the time for us to invest. We are not going to have layoffs. We're going to do quite the opposite. We're going to invest. We're going to invest in our training. We're going to invest in our tools. We're going to invest in our process. That way, when the crisis is over, or at least it's getting better, we'll be in a strong position. And it's exactly what we've been doing. We spent a lot of time on training. We've actually bought more software recently than we had earlier. And we're very ready for the next phase of this situation.
Well, it's interesting. There's that old saying that, winners of economic downturns don't cut, they accelerate. So if you're in that situation, it's good words.
I never heard that saying, but that does make sense. Yeah.
So you mentioned that obviously you guys were 100% remote before, and so it's kind of already, it's very easy kind of adjust. But as a result of just the situation, were there any things that you did from a operational remote standpoint that you've almost you've almost improved or adjusted yourself as a result of this?
Yes, we've accelerated the release of one of our products. So I mentioned earlier, we're known for scheduling at Chili Pepper, and for more than a year now, we're doing some R&D on solutions around emails. And sometimes the simplest solution that the one that takes the longest time to get right. We had worked on a concept of providing comments in Gmail. So if you, I'm sure you're familiar with Google Docs. In Google Docs, you can highlight some words and ping somebody and put a comment to ask a question.
Right. Yeah.
And we thought that this particular ability would be super useful when exchanging email with customers, because you get something, a response or a question from a customer, and you want to ping somebody about that question. And when COVID started to happen, we started getting a lot of these questions. So we started getting customers who would say, hey, I'm laying off half my sales force. Can you do something for me? Renewal is coming. I'm struggling. Can you do something for me? Right? Or all sorts of these questions that we figured we wouldn't be the only ones. And that's a use case where the ability to ping somebody in comments and ask a question or discuss the situation is very useful. So we accelerated this process. We call it inbox comments. And we used more discussions around how to respond to the situation. We have an unusual policy at Chili Pepper. We have a no discount policy. To these days, I'm not aware of anybody else who actually has that policy and enforces it. So everybody pays the same price at Chili Pepper. Our customers all pay the same price. We have somebody comes in by wine license. So we have a famous social network buying 2,000 licenses, and they all pay the same price per license. So when the crisis started to happen, people say, well, I need a discount, do something for me. And so it was a very challenging situation, because that I can see their view that they're struggling, we should help them. And on the other hand, we have this policy that we've been enforcing over years, and we don't want to break it. So there was a lot of discussion around that, and that's something that definitely became a stronger capability within the team, the ability to quickly discuss customer situation and come back with solutions.
Now, I also know in addition to some of, you mentioned the no discount policy and it just being kind of unique. In addition to that, I also know that you have some other unique kind of best practices internally. One of them, for example, is your application of the decision memos that Jeff Bezos of Amazon kind of has made famous. And just to create context, it's memos that are created and read at the beginning of meetings. Can you kind of tell me a bit more about why you decided to use decision memos and some of maybe the other unique best practices or things that you guys do internally, say as a management team?
Yeah, the decision memo, I love it. So you're right. I'm a big fan of Jeff Bezos. I think the guy is a genius. And so whenever he has a particular unusual practice, I've made sure I read about it and understand it. So in his case, concept of a decision memo is that before, when a meeting starts, instead of going through a PowerPoint presentation and having people check their phone while they're going through slides and chat online with their friends, he has the main leader of the meeting write a 6-page memo in Word, so not a PowerPoint. And then everybody, when the meeting starts, to read this memo, and then after that, they discuss it. And we applied that same method. We tried it at Chili Piper. And the way we did it was, since everything is online, everything is in the cloud for us, so that 6-page memo obviously was on Google Doc in the cloud, right? So we started these meetings and we would read these memos, and then we thought, you know what? It'd be helpful if we had read ahead of time and commented on it, because then we'd be able to use these comments as an additional input. So we say, okay, let's do that. And the next big decision, we did the decision memo, so 6 pages, produced ahead of the time of the meeting, and where everybody could comment, and something unexpected happened. By the time the meeting happened, we already had a solution, because people comment, exchange, and then the solution becomes obvious, right?
Right.
The beautiful thing is that in meetings, sometimes people say things just to look smart. On a decision memo in comments, you don't want to do that, right? It's just not helpful. So that whole dynamic of wasted time disappeared. Every comment is very right on. You can link to additional data to support your comment. It turned out to be a much more effective way to make a decision. So now it's become standard practice. Every time we have a decision to make, we write a decision memo, we write the options, we write the pros and cons of the options, everybody write their recommendations, everybody comments and enriches the document. And it does happen sometimes that we still need a call to final decision, but in most cases, decision is obvious. And that is an incredibly effective way to make decisions. We do that for every software we buy, for every pricing decision we make, every new product decision we make, every feature choice in our products. We have a lot of these decision memo. All departments are used to it, and I can't think of any. All our recurring meetings are less than 30 minutes. In most cases, less than 15 minutes. So we don't do these 1 hour catch up and things. We have very few internal meetings. And for your question, another set of best practices, we have a Friday meeting because we're remote. So it's important to make sure that we still have this sense of belonging, right? That you get from walking around the office and that. So the sense of belonging comes from our Friday meeting. We do it at 10 a.m. New York time, which is 7 a.m. in the Pacific, but it's actually 5 p.m. on a Friday in Moscow, where a further east person is in Moscow. And so we have people all across, and we all get together. We use Zoom, and we go through how the company is doing on all fronts. And what we've decided to do is to be very transparent. If you're in an office and you feel you don't know what's happening, then you're going to talk to people around you, and you're going to get a sense for what's really happening. Maybe hear from other people who are in the know. But when everybody's remote, that doesn't happen. So the decision that if people are going to feel that they're part of the company, we should tell everybody everything that's happening. So on a Friday, we review our pipeline, we review our closed deal, we review how much money we're making, we review what products we're working on, we review what marketing is up to, and we do it very efficiently in 30 minutes, but at least everybody knows what the company is up to, and there's no it's whole concept of make sure the vision is shared, and every Friday we repeat it. So it's a very effective way to get this sense of belonging. The interesting thing is that we've also have one more tradition before to close the question, and I hope we'll be able to do it this year. It doesn't look good, but once a year we all get together, and when we all get together, it's party time. So right, because we started about meetings of party time. So the first year when we were small, we went to India. The second year we went to Paris. Last year we went to Ibiza in September. We took everybody to Ibiza, right? Yeah, and booked the Pasha. It was closing night at the Pasha Club with the VIP table. And we partied like it was the end of the world. We didn't know that it could be the end of the world. But that was just unbelievable, because you see all these people who have been working closely together and collaborating all of a sudden meet in person. And the magic of seeing, account managers from Denver meet software developers from Brazil and share a drink and go party is something amazing to watch. So that's a tradition. Hopefully this year we'll be able to do it in spite of Corona. Yeah.
Well, it's I mean, obviously, having fun and balance is important. And I know, there's been a lot of that since, COVID-19. You see it on LinkedIn, people prioritizing and resetting and saying, I don't think even when things go quote unquote back to normal, I'm going to, they're going to do things the way they did, they have a bit more balance in their life. But interesting enough, again, just from kind of looking at, some of your comments, you look at, you have a unique perspective on balance in terms of just how you look at it. So, how do you actually define balance?
Life balance in your life? It's you could argue that it's a unique perspective, not on balance, but on lack of balance. My perspective is, and I say it every Friday, I don't think work is something that's heavy and that you need a balance because you need some time to stay from it. I think work, we're fortunate, not everybody in this situation, but all of us knowledge workers, people who work with our mind, are fortunate to be in a position where we can do things that we just love, right? That are really fun. And my perspective on it is that number one, pick something that you love, and number two, it's much more exciting in life to feel that you're making progress. It's a known thing on what motivates people. There's this idea: does money motivate people or not? But what is found is that this sense of ownership, autonomy, and personal development are what are the most important motivators of human behavior. So as I tell my team all the time, I said, this is not a company for cruising. If you need cruising, there are a lot of other companies that have this value proposition, you can go there. Here we don't cruise. Everybody has to keep improving. And this is how we organize. We make the environment. We have a lot of measurements, but the measurements are not to blame people. It's to say, hey, this is what you need to improve. Let's work together on improving it. An example is on the sales side, we look at conversion rates very closely. And as soon as we see a conversion rate dip, we call the individual and say, hey, it looks like you're having some challenges. Let's research and see which part of the sales process is more challenging, and let's help you get back to that level. So overall, I do expect people to be fully engaged. And when I hear people say, well, you need balance in time, no question you should have the other interest in life, but the we get a flipped approach, which is the work is fun that you'll be happier in your life because you're happy in your job, which is definitely something I've observed around me. Often when people are unhappy in their personal life, they're unhappy in their work. And if you can make them happy in their work, it will go a long way to make their personal life easier. They'll come home happy. Or in our case, they don't even come home; they stay home, and they will have a much more, in effect, balanced life across the board, just because their work is more enjoyable.
I absolutely agree. And the way I actually define balance or even look at balance is that you have to look at balance long-term or on a macro level. I think most people define it as trying to be balanced, weekly or on the micro level, 9 to 5, etc. But I think you can go long-term or long. There could be long stretches where you're, say, unbalanced, but in terms of, say, you're doing work because there's something that you need to do. But over the long term, if you can adjust and maintain, like you said, it's kind of, if you enjoy what you're doing, at the end of the day, it doesn't even feel like it. So
you're exactly right. You're exactly right on this long-term view, and there's actually some science now behind it. The Nobel Prize, Daniel Kahneman, who won for behavioral economics, after he worked on behavioral economics with Amos Tversky, whom I had as a teacher at Stanford. And when Tversky passed away early on in his life, Daniel Kahneman decided to pick another topic of research and worked on happiness, which is an interesting thing for psychologists and economists. And what he found is that there are two very different notions that correspond to what people would typically call happiness. One is experience happiness, which is, I'm having a really good time now. I'm drinking a margarita and it's very enjoyable. But the more important notion is what he calls life satisfaction. That is, you look back at your life or you look at your life and you are satisfied. The experience happiness is something that people forget, discount, or actually even incorrectly recall over time. But life satisfaction is something deeper. And it's exactly what you say. Over the long term, that's why we know, like, I ran a marathon. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of suffering. But I'm so satisfied that I did that. And overall, it's the same thing with work. You can feel that it's a pain that I call a meeting on a Saturday and have a bunch of people work on a Saturday. But overall, when you ship a product the public happy, you'll be much more satisfied. So we obviously making sure everybody has fun on a day-to-day basis, but it's a life satisfaction goal that we have in helping people develop professionally.
Absolutely. So I'd like to switch things up again and move into what I would call my rapid fire segment. So I'm going to say a statement, and you'll have about 60 seconds or less to answer. There's about 6 questions. Nicola, are you ready?
Yeah, I didn't expect that, but I'm ready for everything.
All right, let's go. So first question: your favorite app or tool, and why? Okay,
so that's when I'm afraid I'm biased because my favorite app is Gypsy Time. That helps me being productive. As I mentioned earlier, I designed it because I couldn't find the right answer. It's an app designed to help people actually do things. I have ADHD, so attention deficit. It was very difficult for me to be productive. So Gypsy Time helps to block distractions. It turns off all the distractions where you focus on a task and then reopen them. And it helps you also batch the task into a sprint. So you put all the tasks together and you sprint to it. And that has changed my life. So I'm biased, but I've got to be honest, and that's my favorite app.
Again, I would agree. I don't believe in multitasking. I don't think it's even possible to do effectively. But so
that's right.
So I'm as I also said to you before we started recording, I've downloaded Gypsy Time and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah.
So, what's one thing you wish your phone could do?
Wow, that's an interesting one. One thing I wish my phone could do. Probably detect emotions and provide feedback to adjust. So I never thought of it. And I love the question. So I say that I find that very often in life we have this tendency, a human tendency, to provide a hostile response. So, for example, somebody, my wife says something that I'm not happy with, I tend to have an aggressive response, and this is a response that probably was appropriate 200,000 years ago. That's why we wired to do that. But in 2020, it's no longer appropriate. Hostile response is no longer appropriate. So if there was an app that picked up that I'm getting frustrated and say, Nicola, you're about to say something mean, or unpleasant, don't do it. It's the wrong thing. Say this instead. I'd pay Apple extra money.
I would love to have that on my phone as well. So next question, what do you believe that others might disbelieve?
If you don't mind, I'll give two answers. One is
sure.
tech related, and one that is broader, and let's start with the broader one. And that's probably more controversial. I believe that the concept of nations is obsolete. I believe that I'm French. I live in the US. My wife's Romanian. I pay taxes. My taxes pay for unemployment from some people who live in this territory called the United States of America. I care about them, but I also care about unemployed people in Spain or in Africa. And I think that this whole idea of tribes and getting together and help organizing economies around a particular nation and language is obsolete. Now we have inhabitants of a planet, and we see with global warming, we need to have planet solution. We see with COVID that we need to have a coordinated worldwide solution. And I think that it's going to take a lot of time because it's a deeply entrenched concept. This concept of a nation, as you can tell from our president in the US and the Make America Great Again. It worked. People believe in it, but it's obsolete. It's the same thing where women's right to vote and racial equality. There's a lot of resistance, and when it happens, you think, well, of course, that was obvious, and we should have never had that discrimination. And I feel the same way. So I think in 1 century, we hopefully will get there, maybe earlier. So that's one thing I believe that few people believe. I guess it's a more interesting answer. On the tech side, I believe a lot of things that people don't believe, but the secrets are where we take our bets.
So are you saying that, because I'm trying to remember the name of this book, and I'll put it in the show notes, but the idea that beyond 150 people on a tribe, you can kind of retain those relationships beyond that. Is there a connection around that as far as what you're thinking around, or is it just completely something completely?
Yeah, no, I don't remember the book, the name of the book, but I know what you're referring to. It's slightly different. Right now, we organize around nations, and with this concept that we should just focus on America's interest and or France's interest, and that doesn't make sense.
All right. Okay.
It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is everybody, and it's going to be more and more that way, right? Companies are international, and people read on Facebook. They move from places to the other. You have very smart people whose job it is to focus to optimize the interest of a particular piece of the planet, and that's suboptimal. It's just the wrong way to do it. The optimal way is to have very smart people focused on optimizing the entire planet. Because why would you want to optimize for John Smith in Pennsylvania more than from Rodrigo Gonzalez in Madrid? Just because you live in the same space, it doesn't make sense. We all brothers and sisters. We should just work towards a world where we optimize globally.
So you're saying that like the definition of a nation is something you believe it to be different than say what conventionally
I
it's
believe
been
it to be
defined as.
obsolete. I think we should keep it for sports because it's fun, right? I still root for the French team and I love it, right? And I root for Marseille in soccer. That's fun. But when it comes to how do we make decisions about the economy, about the environment, about the policies, then it's obsolete. We should not try to optimize for a particular continent, right? We should, or a piece of land, we should optimize for the globe.
No, I appreciate that. So maybe said another way, maybe as a result of the situation we've been in, what have you changed your mind about lately that maybe you believed before, but now you've kind of changed your mind?
First, I'm going to say what everybody's changed their mind about that I believe is working remotely is possible. So I can't help make that right, because when we started the company remotely, I had some venture capitalists say we don't want to invest because we don't believe in that model. Others said yeah, it's great, but of course when you're small, when you grow up, it won't happen that way. Now, earlier this week, Facebook announced that half their workforce will work remotely. And I have a good friend who is a chief marketing officer at the Verizon. He has 1,000 people working for him. Before that happened, he swore to me that they had to be together because in this big building in New Jersey, because it's very different for big companies. And now he's telling me that after the crisis, he's going to have everybody work remotely if they want. So there are some beliefs that the crisis has fundamentally changed, and that's a great one.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of times the answer to a question is both, and I've worked remote for many years. I've had that experience, and I'm used to it. But there's always this one side or the other. I think you're going to find that if there is an actual office still there, not you didn't start 100% distributed, there's going to be this, well, you can do one or the other. You can do both. It doesn't necessarily, there's people who are were against remote. Maybe it won't go 100%, but they'll be somewhere in the middle. And then there'll be people that kind of decide, yeah, let's go 100% remote. But I feel like it's going to be, there's going to be, I think it's definitely going to be more embraced. That's
right. I think you're right. I'm not suggesting that getting everybody in the same office somewhere is a problem. I think it can work. But there were a lot of people who made the statement that it was impossible to work remotely, and I think that has been proven wrong.
So, next question. What's the most misunderstood thing about you, or say Chili Piper? You can decide which one you want to answer.
I'm going to go with Chili Piper because it's been our struggle. Let me give you a bit of context. When I started Chili Piper, we were helping sales team scheduling, and I ran into a species called inbound SDR. And I say, what is your job? And they say, well, somebody comes and fill a form on our website. So our marketers spend a lot of money to get traffic. Somebody fills a form that they want to have a meeting. When they click submit, they get the page that say, thank you, somebody is going to call you. And my job, me inbound SDR, is to call these people to schedule that meeting. And I said, sounds like interesting. How is that going? And they say, I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. I'm converting at 40%. This is true story. This is in modesty as I convert at 40%. And I thought, so you mean to tell me that 100 people ask for a meeting and only 40 of them get a meeting, 60 of them don't, and you think it's going great? And that was the most puzzling thing, that people were satisfied with this remote conversion. So we built a solution that we call Concierge, that in real time, it's a JavaScript that you put in your pages. In real time, it takes the data from the form, it qualifies the prospect, it reaches to a sales rep, it dials the rep, dials back the prospect, connect them in real time, or retrieve the calendar from the rep and book a meeting in real time. This solution, as you can expect, is a much better experience for the prospect. And what happened immediately is that conversion rate double. So we get people from 40% to 80%. And your question is, what is it people don't believe it? They do not believe us. We go and say, look, it's going to this day, I see people say, no, the right thing to do is to give faster notifications to your SDRs. Or that. It's the most misunderstood that this process change is going to is the way of the future and is going to be completely standard at some stage. People still believe that they can't do that, and the way to do inbound is to send notifications that are inbound SDR call.
I mean, usually it's that old saying, the first to respond, right? Gets the deal.
And people agree to that. Everybody agrees to the idea that the first responder gets it. But for some reason, they still think that the old ways of doing things is the right way. And that is the most misunderstood thing about Chili Pepper.
So last question, and this is really the closer here, is, where can people find out a little bit more about you, Nicola, and obviously Chili Pepper on the interweb?
So on Chili Pepper, we use our own product, as you would hope. If you come to our website, you fill a form, you'll immediately be connected with some of us. It's important to know that. So we have funky names in my company. So Chili Piper, the play on word, is not Chili Pepper, it's Piper as in pipeline, Piper. And then I'd love to have more people come and try our smart to-do list focus on achieving. It's called Gypsy Time. Gypsy has as many spellings as you could imagine. Ours is GIPSY. Time, Gypsy Time, and you can try our product directly. I'd love your feedback. It's my first name, Nicolas, Nicolas at gypsytime.com.
And I'll put that in the show notes as well. So
awesome.
Well, I mean, this has been fun, and obviously, I hope I get the next invite to Ibiza.
In high demand.
So I'll be looking forward to that. I mean, any parting words before we close off?
No, it was a great pleasure to be on the show. There are a lot of changes going on, so. It's great to be able to exchange ideas and feedback on what's changing and try to get the future.
That's great. Well, okay. Well, that's it. That's all.